All right, Larry Krueger with you on a Friday. Hope everybody's having a great September the 20th as we come at you with Niners Nightly on a Friday. And we're going to talk about the Niners and the Rams with Greg Beacham, who's been covering the Rams for a number of years. The AP writer for the Rams. And how
No
you
worries.
doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Larry. I appreciate it.
Well, what do you think we're going to see from the Rams? We know, both teams are banged up. There's no Puka Nakua. There's no Cooper Kupp, most likely. I guess how reliable are the other Rams weapons? I'd heard rumors today that maybe Kyron Williams will be used out of the slot with Blake Corum in the backfield. What kind of wrinkles do you think Sean McVey can come up with before Sunday?
I think they'll do the best they can under the circumstances, which are not great when your top three passing targets are out, including Tyler Higbee, who hasn't played yet this year. I mean, they've got guys who can play. Demarcus Robinson and Tyler Johnson are, competent NFL receivers. Tutu Atwell is a guy who's played well in spots when Sean McVay has allowed him to play. But, I mean, they don't have a whole lot they can do. They can try to use Kyron Williams as a pass catcher, obviously, which would be really cool. Get him more involved, getting more touches. They can get Blake Corum more involved, the rookie. He hasn't done a lot. He's touched the ball a little bit so far, but not in a significant way so far. But they're going to have to try the best they can under the circumstances, which is admittedly not good with the skill position players. And that's not even getting into the offensive line, which is walking wounded at this point.
Tell us a little bit about the Corum draft choice. I mean, he was on the national champion Michigan Wolverines. I don't know. I didn't see any in the pre-draft stuff projecting him to the Rams. A lot of people had him going to the Chargers to reunite with Jim Harbaugh. It didn't happen. But I kind of think this is a culture type player. How's he been received? How's he looked this summer?
Well, we were all surprised when he got drafted, just like you were. The Rams team to send Sean and Les Snead in particular, it seems to revel in going against conventional wisdom, drafting a running back in the third round, particularly somebody as small as Blake Corum. But he has fit in very well. He's a guy that they've said they've liked from day one, and Sean has used in a variety of ways. He just hasn't had a chance to get in, really do it in a game yet. He got a few carries, but nothing significant. When they pick a running back that high, you think they're going to use him a lot early on. I mean, with a running back, every hit you take, shortens your career. So you want to get as many touches as possible. Not everybody's Frank Gore. So you got to get guys in there and play while they're young, but hasn't happened yet. But, if they take opportunities to use Kyron Williams in other ways, then maybe Blake Corum will get used in other ways as well. And they'll get into it. But in terms of fitting in terms of a culture thing, I think it's been a really good match so far. He's the kind of guy that Sean McVay likes, a worker, a team first guy, and all that has been great. It's just a matter of finding a role for him on the field.
They spent a lot of money on the offensive line in the offseason. It's funny, the Niners value the defensive line. It seems like the Rams showed this summer or this offseason that they valued the offensive line. And then all of a sudden, Nota Boom goes down. Avila, who's a tremendous player. I think of Steve Avila as one of the great young guards in the sport. He goes down. They're going to have Bo Limmer, who's a very good player at Arkansas, but he's a smart guy, but he hasn't obviously he's very young. He's going to start at center. Logan, is it Bruce is going to start at guard?
Logan Bruce, yeah.
How do you see the Rams offensive line? I would imagine the Niners are going to play lots of games up front to try to make this line communicate with one another.
Yeah, I would think they would feast on this line. No disrespect to the Rams line. It's just impossible to plan for as many injuries and position substitutions and changes they've had to make over the last 2 weeks, which is just crazy. I mean, they spent a lot of money. Their number one priority to win has to be to keep Matthew Stafford upright and to establish a running game, and they need to do that with their offensive line. Trouble is, when 3 of those guys are out, 2 of them are playing injured. Kevin Dotson is playing on an injured leg. He's just still out there because he's a baller. But they just don't have a lot they can do in terms of fixing things. They'll use a rookie. They'll use Bo Limmer. They'll use Logan Bruss, a third-round pick who hasn't really panned out yet, and see what they can do. But the trouble is they're playing the 49ers this week, and it's a nightmare week to try to break in new guys, to try to figure out what's going to work and what's not going to work. So I would assume Sean will look at that and say we should not keep the ball in Matthew Stafford's hands any longer than we have to. We should call short routes, play action, move the ball, like you said, use the slot more, something that neutralizes or minimizes the impact of San Francisco's pass rush. But Sean often looks at that and says, okay, I'm going to do the opposite because that's what somebody's going to expect me to do. So we'll see what they end up doing. And, if you fall behind, then you lose you lose a lot of the initiative anyway. So I think those are the best they can, but I don't expect them to win that matchup. I just can't imagine that.
Greg, you're a pro's pro. You've been doing this for a while and you've seen other coaches beyond McVey, but so you're probably be a good person to ask. Like, where does McVey kind of fit in the grand scheme of things as far as the media? What's it like to cover him? Does he let you in? Does he show trust there? Or does he keep everybody, a distrusting arm's length? Is he personable with people? How is he on a day-to-day basis to cover?
He's changed over the time he's been here. When he came, he was 30 years old, youngest coach in the NFL, a position he would hold for the next 7 seasons. And when he came, I always told people, this guy's playing a character. He's playing the youngest Gruden brother. He's learned from Jay. He's learned from the guys who are in the coaching tree how to sound like a coach, how to express information like a coach, how to say you have a real respect and appreciation for everything, how you always make sure you name your you name your assistant coaches. Whenever somebody asks you a question about a receiver, you name your receivers coach. Eric Yarber's doing a great job with that guy. And a lot of that is commendable. And if I had been 30 years old and I had to talk in front of everybody in the world, 3 times a week, I would have picked persona 2. It seemed like the easiest way to handle that. As the years have gone on, I will say he's let us in more. Let us see more of who he is. He drops a swear word every once in a while, and feels really naughty about it. And he'll make jokes occasionally. He has kind of a cutting sense of humor, which you've seen on Hard Knocks a couple of times. But in general, he's developed a public persona that has kind of become part of him. So, what he was playing early in his career, that's who he is now to a certain extent. I don't think any reporter will ever really get to know him just because he's a focused guy on one thing. But once he leaves coaching, it'll be interesting to talk to him again and have a beer and see what he's like and what he has to say about the exchanges he had with the media over the years and how he adjusted and evolved.
When's that going to be? Is he going to be a short timer like a John Madden who becomes a TV sensation? He's right there in LA. He's a good looking guy. He could probably do that. Or you think he's more like a Kyle Shanahan, the more I'm around Shanahan, the more I think this guy's going to do this for a long, long time. What do you think?
Right.
If you a short timer or a long, is this just the beginning for McVey?
He had that third life crisis a few years ago where he was talking about, I'm going to be on TV someday. I won't be around as long as you guys. Ha ha ha. And then he kind of went through a couple things after the season. And he's a guy who gets so wound up, who gets so worked up in the lifestyle, in the preparation, in the competition that when he gets to the end of a season and it releases, he has these kinds of thoughts. He's like, I can't believe this. I could just go to TV and relax and not work. But then the competitive side of him kicks in again. He needs about a week off. Then he remembers, oh my gosh, I got here because I'm competitive, not because I want to be on TV and look pretty in a suit. So I think I've always thought he would stick with this team as long as the current core was together because it was a really fun core and then see what would happen after that. Trouble is that core is largely gone except for Stafford and Kupp at this point. So he seems to have embraced the challenge of building a new team here. He's talked a lot about it, which he would not do if he had one foot out the door. He's very much said, I'm going to stick with this. He's realized that coaching is what he is, what he does. He's also figured out how to do it a little bit better, how to make his life a little more balanced. He's got a wife and a child now, and he's kind of realized, you can do this and still have a life outside of football. I think Kyle Shanahan's done a great job of embracing that. Like you said, he's probably going to do this forever. He might be the Niners coach forever, but he also, he has a family and he knows how to balance his life. And I think Sean McVey has made strides in that as he's 38 years old now, and he's starting to figure out what he wants to do the rest of his life. Having said that, if the Rams are really bad this year and if they don't make significant improvements next year, I could see him being like, this might be a long-term project for somebody else. I'll go do TV and then I'll come back to the New York Giants for $50 million a year or something, some massive thing like that. But I think he has everything he wants in LA, and it's just a challenge for him to build a winning team out of the pieces of what he's got right now. They're not that far away, but they're not close right now either at this moment. So I think it'll depend a lot on how this season goes, and more importantly, next season.
I asked Kyle Shanahan a question this week at the presser. I'm going to share the screen and play this for you and listen to what he said here. I asked him about the Rams, and he's fully aware that the Rams are going to come into this game somewhat desperate. What is your assessment of the Rams, Kyle? They come into this game, you would think, pretty desperate.
Yeah, I think, anytime that you lose like they did, that's, and being 0-2, I know that feeling. And in the NFL, whether you lose 2 in a row after winning 10 in a row, or you start 0-2. If you lose 2 in a row in the NFL, it's always a kind of an Armageddon feeling in a building, especially when you lose lopsided like that. So, how teams come out the week after that. It's such a fine line in those things. We were a couple of plays away from the game going like that in Minnesota. So it can happen so fast. And all you got to do is watch the Detroit game the week before to see how good of a team this team can be. I mean, they'd taken it to overtime in the 5th quarter to get a chance to win, and how they had to come back to do that there at the end. So last week got out of hand a little bit early, especially the 4 plays they had on offense and just not getting started quick. But by no means was that an indication of what this team's going to be going through the rest of the year.
I mean, I don't know, Greg. It's like we all like to think of ourselves as independent thinkers. We're not part of group think, let's just say. But you know what? It's so damn hard in the NFL. It's like, I think right now the prevailing wisdom is, man, the Niners are, running into the Rams, and the lowly Rams are just going to rampage them. It's going to be domination from start to finish. Puka's out and Cooper's out and this and that. But you know what? I saw week 1 and they look pretty good. And you know what? Maybe it wasn't that the Rams won 10 games last year. Maybe the Rams aren't so bad. Maybe Detroit's one of the best teams in football. Maybe Kyler Murray has found himself in Arizona, might actually be pretty good. They get good weapons, the tight end, the wide receiver, the back. I mean, come on. I think there's a chance that people are looking at the Rams in those 2 games going, they're 0-2, they're bad. It may be that Arizona and Detroit are really good. What is your perspective on it?
Yeah, it is hard to make a judgment after 2 weeks. You're right. There's a lot of different scenarios that could play out. The biggest problem for me in believing in the Rams being, much better than 0-2, much better than the team that got dog walked by Arizona last week, is that their defense is not a championship caliber defense. I don't think so. I don't think they thought it would be going into the season. You can't make up for the loss of Aaron Donald, and they didn't even really try. They just sort of said, we're going to get guys, from within, we're going to promote, and we're going to draft. We drafted Braden Fisk to play up front. We drafted, Jared Verse to play on the side. We're going to count on rookies. We're going to rebuild the secondary and try to go through. They lost Aaron Donald. They also lost Raheem Morris, which is a huge loss as well. He's the guy who organized and made that defense happen and made it work out of what Brandon Staley left behind for 3 seasons. They don't have any of that now. They have a better secondary. They have much worse linebackers. They have a much worse defensive line. And, that can be covered up against some opponents. They play Chicago next week. Sean McVey can figure out a way to beat Chicago. I don't know that he can figure out a way to beat Kyle and the 49ers just because of who Kyle is, the hold that he has over that rivalry, and the baseline of players. I mean, the Niners are very banged up. Their baseline is way higher than the Rams baseline. When you lose somebody, it comes down like that, So I think they've got a shot. I think that they're a competent team. I don't bet against Sean McVay figuring stuff out because he's repeatedly figured things out over his 8 years in the NFL. San Francisco is a tough matchup, and it's tough to win when they're full strength and good, when they have Aaron Donald up front wreaking havoc. So, it's tough to bet against the 49ers this week for me.
Chris Schula is Don Shula's grandson. If you know that name, if you see that name, you're like, oh, that sounds very familiar. Yes, that's Don Shula's grandson, who I guess went to Miami of Ohio with McVey. He's the defensive coordinator. Okay, yeah, so they go back to college. What can you tell us about Schula as a coordinator? I'll say this, Greg, man, I know this is a work in progress, D. I know Aaron Donald just walked away, but Jared Verse and Byron Young off the edges, that's a nice place to start. And Fisk is a high motor guy, and Kinchins was a good player at Miami. What's the Ram defense look like? Is there anything that you can tell us about Schula and his kind of tendencies or philosophy?
We're still learning about him. The main thing that seems to have played out from what we've seen through 2 games is that he's trying to take, what Brandon Staley emphasized and things that he was into, and try to play them out over the new personnel that they have. Raheem did a great job of taking Staley's defense, all the innovations that we all know about, and it's establishing it in terms of what they had, and then adding tweaks and surprising things that confuse people. We haven't seen yet what Chris Schula really wants to do with it. We know from talking to him and from talking to Sean McVay that they want to go back to what they had before while still taking it forward with the strengths they had. Like you said, they have 2 strong edge rushers now, but they're very young edge rushers. They have 2 strong guys up front in Braden Fisk and Kobe Turner, but they're both young. I mean, they're counting on, and then when you add Cam Kinchins, they're counting on 5 rookies or second-year guys to make big contributions around that veteran secondary, and the linebackers who they clearly don't care who plays middle linebacker for them because they let Ernest Jones go for nothing. So you have to think that the way they think about it is that Quentin Lake at safety is going to fill the role that Ernest Jones did at linebacker in some ways, mopping up most of the tackles, getting in the middle of the defense, coming up front, hitting the line against running backs. So we'll see where he goes in the long run. It's very hard to tell because, Chris has been on this staff the entire time, that Sean has been here. And he's coached linebackers. He's coached the secondary. We got to know him a little bit, but he's never been one of the more vocal assistant coaches that tells you, that sounds like I'm angling to be a coordinator. So this is my philosophy. This is what I think of that. This is what I think of this. Because we try to talk to him occasionally, preseason, and sometimes you can get coaches during the week. He's been pretty guarded so far. I wasn't in town for a lot of training camp because I was at the Olympics, but he's been very guarded in terms of what he said and what he wants to do, and while praising his players and stuff. So I think the next few games will really tell us what we want to know about him in terms of where he wants to go with it, and more importantly, where Sean McVey wants to go with it, because these guys are so tied together. Like I said, they're college roommates. Chris Schula used to stay at Sean's house as a house guest for the first couple of years when they were working. Chris didn't get a house right away. He didn't have a wife and kids, so he didn't get a house right away. So they were frat boys hanging out together. And we'll see what he does in the long term. In the near term, it's too hard to tell, what he wants to do and what he's able to do with the players he has.
Who's got the upper hand in this battle between two of the NFL's better offensive young coaches? I mean, it's funny. I don't even think I can call Kyle young anymore. He's been so weathered. He's aged like a president in this in this role. I mean, he really has. I mean, it's you look at his picture from the day he was introduced. It's like, who is that high school kid? Now he's like, it looks like, he's rugged. He's got this, salt and pepper beard, and he's just looks beaten down. But who's got the edge? Who's got the edge? Is it Shanahan, who's like 8-2 or something like that, or something like that? I don't know if that's the exact record, or is it McVey who got the big win? He got the NFC Championship win. He's got the Super Bowl ring on his finger. Is it a great relationship because both believe that they have one up on the other right now?
That's the ultimate barroom argument. I mean, is it better to, peak in the Super Bowl year and win the NFC Championship game over your buddy and then win a Super Bowl ring? Or is it better to maintain consistent excellence over a period of years where you beat the Rams 10 of the last 13, I think it is. And that's in the two of those wins are the NFC Championship game, which is great, but we all know that game was a toss-up that could have gone either way. And the game last year where Carson Wentz beat Sam Darnold, that, barely counts as an NFL game. So I tend to favor consistent excellence because I think that's harder. I think the Rams have done a good job of loading up for the Super Bowl run, and they nailed that. And they weren't just good that year. They've been good for 5 years, 6 years, 6 of the 7 that Sean was here. So, I mean, you got to if you're Kylan's argument, you got to say scoreboard. I mean, it's 10 out of the last 13. He beats him down twice a year with alarming regularity. So I think they're two of the 3 or 4 best coaches in the NFL right now. So you cannot lose if you're a Niners fan or a Rams fan. Both these fan bases were very fortunate. These two guys were on the market when they were both looking for coaches in early 2017. I think it's been great. It's ushered in an incredible era of California football and a great NFC West rivalry, which I think is amazing and will continue to be amazing for as long as Sean can stay focused on football and stay in this job. But in terms of picking one, if you're going to put a gun to my head and make me pick one, I think Kyle Shanahan's done, more consistent stuff with the players that he has, and the Niners have built a more consistent roster. But, Sean's got a ring.
Yeah, Sean's got a ring, and that's in a lot of ways that's the bottom line. Greg Beecham with us, kind enough to give us some of his time. 2 last questions for you. Stan Kroenke stays in the background. At least we don't hear about him up here. Maybe he doesn't stay in the background. But when he bought the team, it was like this mad dash. We got to sign veterans, forget the draft picks. Let's go for veterans. Let's build this thing up. We need to win a Super Bowl. We need to rebuild the audience that we left for St. Louis. Some of these people became Niner fans, Raiders fans, Chargers fans. Now we're back. We want to reclaim LA, and they won their Super Bowl. But is it working? Because 75% of the crowd is going to be Niner fans, if you believe the estimates. What is the mood, the appetite, whatever? You're from here or spent time here and are now there. So you have a little perspective on that market, I'm sure. What can you tell us about kind of how Los Angelinos feel about the Rams?
I think the Rams have done everything that you can possibly do in the circumstances that they were given to build a fan base. You got to, you go back to 1994 when a woman who owned the Rams was bamboozled into an awful business decision to move a franchise from the nation's second largest media market to St. Louis. It's just, times have changed. Stadium finding is different, but there's just no denying that it was an inexcusable thing. And you cannot be surprised that people took it personally in Los Angeles. And remember, before that, the previous 15 years, the Rams have been playing in Anaheim, again because they were cheap. So they left Los Angeles in general and left it to the
and
Raiders.
You should probably explain what that means, because like I'm from Northern California, you spent time up here and there. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're all from a different part of the country. Anaheim is Orange County. That's a different place than LA. I mean, how would you explain it? I mean, other than that.
It's 30 miles away from downtown Los Angeles, and that's a long way to drive for a football game. It's still the same market, whatever. These definitions become fungible, but the bottom line is people in Los Angeles don't consider Orange County to be part of Los Angeles, and people in Orange County don't consider Orange County to be part of Los Angeles either. So, it's a dividing line, and it's a fake dividing line, but it's real in terms of the hearts and minds of people. It's real in terms of who you represent and what you mean to a community. And that's what a lot of sports is about. I mean, it's about representing a community. And I know, having covered the Niners, I know, the struggles between, Candlestick Park as opposed to Levi's in terms of like the way it relates to a community. And San Francisco is a little different because, the sports fans in the Bay Area are scattered all around the Bay, and it's a different setup. Los Angeles loves its Los Angeles teams. I mean, the Lakers and the Dodgers are by far the most popular teams, way past anything else. USC football had the great run in the 2000s where they became the de facto home team. And while the Rams were in St. Louis, a lot of people adopted other teams, and a lot of people adopted the 49ers because the late 90s 49ers were very interesting. Steve Young is a very interesting player to root for. They contended. Steve Mariucci knew what he was doing. He won a bunch of games, and then by the time
you're in you're in that region.
Yeah.
So you're getting all those television games, right?
Exactly. You're watching the Niners every week. They're winning. I mean, that's a good team. Seifert's got good teams. Mariucci's got good teams. By the time the Niners got bad, they already had a foothold in this market, that survived the 2000s when I covered the team and they were awful. And then it stayed that way. It's generational. This is sports fandom is not a logical thing. You don't just root for, you don't change teams. You stick with who you got. And when the Rams leave town, when the Raiders leave town, a lot of people take that personally. You know what I mean? And the Raiders are different because they're kind of, they're California's team. They have an outlaw image that goes beyond sports, but the Rams did not have that. They were a team that abandoned Los Angeles to move to Anaheim, then abandoned Los Angeles to move to St. Louis. And they lost a lot of their support. They lost a lot of their fan base. The Rams have come back. They've tried to do everything possible to rebuild what they had going here and make it better, honestly. I mean, they've built, a gorgeous stadium. They've got cool, eye-catching uniforms. They've got a charismatic head coach who's one of the best in the league. They've run through a succession of star players. They made 2 Super Bowls. They've won a championship. You can't do a lot better than that in 8 years in terms of like building a foundation for something. And they are doing it. You see more Rams gear and jerseys and everything and flags and all that kind of stuff than you ever did. It's been a gradual progression every year they've been here. Having said that, it's generational. The 40-year-old guy who picked the Niners as his favorite team when he was in high school is not going to change just because the Rams came back to town and are really cool and interesting. He doesn't care. He can follow the 49ers online. He can watch your show. He can read. He can do all that kind of stuff. So, it's the Rams, to their credit, understand it's generational. You talk to the front office, you talk to those guys. They understand what it is. They know they're not going to win over the guy who already picked the Niners, who already picked the Raiders. They're trying to win new fans. They're trying to win the hearts and minds of the next generation. I think it's working as well as it can. It takes a lot of time, and the stands are going to be very red on Sunday.
Greg, you're a terrific guest. Last question for you, and we really do appreciate your time. Everybody should follow Greg on X and read his writings. And it's funny. There are so many people that have read tons of your recaps and stories. They may not realize it.
Exactly.
Greg is you've read Greg. I guarantee you, if you've read sports in Los Angeles, you've read Greg. Wild card factor in this one, because the Rams are down some guys, the Niners are down some guys. But this is pro football, and somebody always can step up. To me, as a onlooker, the guys that I fear in this game, Tutu Atwell. The 49ers did not have an answer for Justin Jefferson, who just burned them for a 97-yard touchdown last week. I asked the defensive coordinator about the matchup with Odom, a backup safety at the line of scrimmage there in man coverage, locked up with Jefferson. He didn't really have anything to say about it other than, he didn't make the play. Well, we know he didn't make the play, but it's a terrible matchup. So I'm not sure if the Niners have the the DB to stand up to Tutu Atwell and the speed that he possesses. He can run right on by. And then I would say the other wild card is this kid from Texas, Jordan Whittington, who's a strong receiver. He's young, but with no Cooper Kupp and no Puka Nacua. I mean, those two guys I think are the two guys that I probably fear the most in this game outside of the edge rushers. Give me your wild cards on either side of the ball in this game. Who are wild card guys to you for Niners or Rams?
You took the words right out of my mouth on Tutu Atwell, because he's a guy who has performed, like we said earlier, he's performed whenever he got an opportunity under Sean, but Sean has not given him many opportunities at all in terms of, whether it was from the Robert Woods era onto, the guy, Puka stepped in front of him. Obviously, I mean, Puka's a generational talent, it looks like. So we'll see what happens when he comes back. But Tutu Atwell is a guy who runs good routes, who's a professional receiver, from a good college program, who can get open, and he's often the fastest guy on the field when he's out there. And like you said, Sean will have watched Justin Jefferson run away from the Niners, who are down a DB, down a key cornerback. So I think they get those guys out there in 3 receiver sets. You've got Demarcus Robinson and Tyler Johnson drawing some attention. You may be able to split Tutu into situations where you can be a threat downfield. He's also a good threat in the possession game. He when you see a guy with that much speed, you're like, oh, he's the deep threat. He can also catch the ball mid range. He's had some really good games for the Rams when Sean has let him. I've always thought when he gets on another team, he's gonna be one of those guys who people would be like, oh, this 5th-year receiver came out of nowhere and is really good. Well, we've seen that he's good. He just has trouble breaking into Sean's receiver group. And Jordan Whittington is another guy who has a lot of skills, who's just as young and is just in the game trying to figure out what his role is. So I could see them having a package for him and having some things that he can do as well. In terms of the Niners side of the ball, I just they're so talented. I mean, just that roster has impressed me for 5 years now in terms of the way they find guys who just step up and play another role. So I couldn't pick an actual one person, because I just feel like Kyle does such a good job of getting guys who he's worked on in practice and he knows certain things they can do. He can put them in that situation to be successful, and they go out and do it. Sean's been like that sometimes, and sometimes you're like, oh man, I really wish you would do this or that. Maybe because I know the Rams a little bit more. I know a few more things about them, but I will say that if I was searching the waiver wire in free agency, on a fantasy team, I would be scooping up Tutu Atwell like nothing. I would grab it.
Yeah, in fact, one S Flood here says, great insight and interview coming from a diehard Niners fan. Yeah, Greg, you've been fantastic. I would say your knowledge of the Rams is probably the best of anybody we talked to this week. I got to ask you, since I don't have an answer, and I've asked this question a couple times. Ernest Jones, what happened there? What happened with Ernest Jones? He was their leading tackler. They need this guy against the run. They've given him 5.8 a carry, 5.3 a carry. They traded a really good inside linebacker to Tennessee this summer. What is there? There's got to be a backstory, right?
You can't get an answer from the Rams on or off the record in terms of what actually went down. So we're left to piece the pieces together, from context clues. I would assume that there was some sort of dialogue with Ernest Jones' agent that was, that made them think that angered the Rams in some way. They'll never admit it. They would never say that. But to trade your leading tackler, to trade a do everything guy who looks really good in Tennessee, and who is exactly what they need for, a marginal upgrade in a late round pick in 2026, it just boggles the mind in terms of not letting him play out his rookie deal, which he had said he would do, So it doesn't make any logical sense. And when you ask Sean, he says, oh, it's a football decision, which is clearly, I don't know how that's possibly true, that they thought Troy Reeder and Christian Roseboom would do as well as Ernest Jones. I just don't see that. It also speaks to how much they value the middle linebacker position, which is not at all. They don't really care who plays it. They've proven that over the years. They've done that for years. They let Corey Littleton, who was a Pro Bowler, walk for nothing just because they didn't want to give him a veteran contract. He wasn't even going to get much of a raise, So they literally don't care who plays that position. They care more about who the safety is stepping up to make big hits and stuff in that role that they've currently got Quentin Lake in. And Cam Curl can play as well. So they care much more about that than they do who's the linebacker. But the trouble is, when a coach sees that, he can exploit that. He can get Troy Reeder in pass coverage sometimes. He can get Christian Roseboom in pass coverage sometimes, where they're going to lose 9 times out of 10. It's not that they're not good players. They're just not at the level that Ernest Jones is in terms of coverage, in terms of versatility, in terms of football instincts, all those things that Ernest Jones is better at. So we don't know exactly what happened, and we assume there was something behind the scenes that the Rams can be ruthless. They can cut ties with guys and not look back. They got rid of Robert Woods, hometown guy, got hurt before the Super Bowl, beloved, great locker room guy, the Rams no, done. We're done. Got rid of Cam Akers. He fought with a running back coach. He did something wrong, and he was their leading rusher. Came back from Achilles injury to play in the Super Bowl. Got rid of him. Tossed him out. Sean can be ruthless that way. Les can be ruthless that way, and that part of being a pro in pro sports. But it's also kind of rough when you lose a guy like Ernest Jones for a defense that could really use a guy like Ernest Jones.
Something tells me mid third quarter, there's gonna be Rams fans in that stadium going, why did we get rid of Ernest Jones again? Hey, Greg, awesome stuff, man. Love reading you, have for years. You do an incredible job. Keep up the great work. You're a great follow on X. Thanks for coming on. Maybe late in the year when the Niners run it back up here at Levi's, we can get you back on. Love reading you. Best of luck to you. Have a great season ahead. And thanks for your time tonight on Niners Nightly.
That'd be great. Thanks, Larry. I had a good time. Talk to you soon.